Hello and welcome to Entirely English. Today we are going to be walking down the dairy aisle of a supermarket. But before we do that, I want to welcome Sweet Brummy. I guess you're from Birmingham. Nora Maddie and Looney Bear. Again, cool names. Thank you for subscribing. Do pop some information below. Let us know about you. And anybody whose name I haven't mentioned, it's because YouTube haven't told me to introduce yourself. Put some information in the comments and let me know. All right. So if you're planning to come from the US to Britain, or if you're planning to go from Britain or Europe to the US, you need to prepare yourself for the absolute minefield that is the dairy aisle. Because the US and the UK have completely different naming systems, legal standards, and food safety laws. So buying your morning essentials can be a total guessing game, whichever country you're going to. First, the vocabulary. For example, if you ask for semi-skimmed milk in the US, you'll probably get blank stares. They would call it 2% milk, and standard skimmed milk is labeled as skim milk or non-fat. Regarding fat and the great con trick that supermarkets have perpetrated on us for the last 30 plus years, there'll be a note at the end of this video, which I think you'll find interesting if you don't know it already. But before that, let's continue. So with milk, the real trap is in the cap coloring. They're completely flipped. Now, just like the US, we used to use cap colors to identify the different types of milk. So one color for full fat, one cap color for half fat, etc. But because of recycling, colored plastics are more difficult to recycle, if at all. So now our milk has turned to just white caps, but the label is color-coded. For the purposes of this video, for understandability, I will just refer to cap colors, but you understand label colors. So in the UK, the green cap is king. The most popular everyday milk is semi-skimmed. But in the US, the cap is dark blue and means 2%. And the green cap in the US means 1%. Let's have a look at these. I'll put a table on screen so you can follow it. Maybe do a print screen. So if you're going to one of these two countries from the other one, you can print it out, or copy it on your phone, take it with you and not be confused. So we have fat-free milk, that is skimmed milk in the UK with a red cap, and skim or non-fat milk in the US with a purple or pink cap. They are 0.1 to 0.3% fat. Then we have the light low-fat milk in the UK, 1%, and it is an orange cap. In the US, also 1%, but a green cap. Then we have the standard low-fat, which is, as I mentioned before, semi-skimmed milk in Britain, the green cap, 2% in America with a dark blue cap. There is a difference in fat content. In the UK, semi-skimmed milk is 1.5 to 1.8% fat. In the US, it's exactly 2% fat. And then we have full fat milk. We call it whole milk or full fat milk, and it has a blue cap, blue label. And in America, they call it whole milk, and it has a red cap. Again, there's a difference in the fat content. In the UK, it's 3.5 to 3.7%, getting towards 4% fat. In the US, it's 3.25% fat. Now, there is a big consumer misconception when it comes to whole fat milk. Many people, try not to laugh, believe that whole fat milk, many people believe it is 100% fat. Obviously, it's not. It's like 3.5%. And when you think about a pint or a litre of milk, 3.5% is such a small volume. But again, look at the end of the video when we get there to look at this fat deceit. All right, if we move slightly further down the refrigerated aisle, you'll hit the fermented stuff. Over the last decade, British supermarkets have taken to stocking kefir because it's heavily driven by the wonderful influx of Eastern European communities. who come to stay here, and they drink the stuff in a plain, tart, and sour form. So that's what our supermarkets have begun stocking. That's what our advertisers on television are promoting now. Now, if you go to America, you will find kefir, but it's been completely hijacked by the wellness smoothie trend. It's almost impossible to find a traditional, unflavored kefir in a standard supermarket. Instead, the shelves are dominated by these intensely sweetened, flavored, like strawberry, blueberry, vanilla forms of kefir. So while this wellness, gut health thing has exploded in America, or exploded in the 2010s in America, they then go and add stuff and remove stuff from the kefir, removing its beneficial qualities to a great extent. And they will shelve it in the section with the premium yogurts, kombucha, and functional health drinks, whatever a functional health drink is. Even standard yogurt has a divide between the UK and the US. Our shelves tend to be packed with the traditional Greek-style yogurts, the French-style set yogurts. We do have the more popular, like Ski, the slightly sweetened ones. Whereas the US market is obsessed with a stabilized, thick, low-fat tubs, often pumped with gelatin or cornstarch to give it that thickness. Now, if you try to bake an American recipe over here, the cream section of the supermarket could break your brain. The names don't match up, the fat percentages don't match up, and swapping them directly with something that seems the same could completely ruin what you're trying to bake. An American recipe might say you need heavy cream, which sits at 36% fat. If you replace that with British double cream, you're in for a real shock, because double cream is a massive 48% fat. But we do have whipping cream in both countries. So while you could mix the double cream with milk like you do with the half and half to reduce the fat content and make it skimmed milk or something, your closer bet would be to use British whipping cream. British whipping cream, the stuff you whip up and you lay your cakes with, that sort of thing, is about 36% fat, so much closer to the heavy cream the Americans talk about. Now, very briefly, we have buttermilk in both countries, but while American supermarkets stock it in huge cartons, in Britain you find it in little boxes because it's not such a popular ingredient in our cooking. So the material's the same, it's the quantity that is sold is different. Now, as we move on, we inevitably come to the cheese and butter section. Now, you've probably heard this before. I've heard it several times on YouTube videos. People who go to America are shocked and, I dare say, disgusted by what is called cheese there. They say it tastes like rubber or plastic, or it has the texture of rubber or plastic, but is actually tasteless. And that is harsh. A very harsh stereotype of the cheese, but it actually has scientific backup to it. So we'll come to that in a moment. The reverse is when Americans come to Britain and France and Europe, they see cheese on a display, the big wheels of cheese and different flavors and all the smell. I guess sometimes they're disgusted by the strength of the smell. But let's have a look at this American cheese first. Now, the quality of the American cheese comes down to an 80-year-old law called the 60-day raw milk rule. In the US, it is actually illegal to sell cheese made from unpasteurized milk that's not been aged for at least 2 months. This completely blocks the sale of traditional camembert or brie in America because it would not follow that rule. They simply cannot legally exist in the US. But pasteurization kills the bacteria and the microflora that give cheese that deep, rich flavor and texture. You know, in Britain, we have Cheddar Gorge. There are caves there which are stacked with cheeses that are not pasteurized, and they're there for years, maturing and developing these flavors, totally illegal in America. And to make matters worse, this cheese in America, this pasteurized cheese, is loaded with emulsifying salts. Now, this is because real cheese spoils quickly when it's transported in hot trucks across the country. And when you put it on your hot food, your burgers, for example, it breaks down into a gooey, uneven mess. So a man called J.L. Kraft in 1916 developed this process of adding these emulsifying salts to permanently bind the water and fat together so the cheese melts uniformly. So on your burgers, it will melt as a flat layer of blanket, but it completely dilutes the flavor of the cheese. And these emulsifiers are exactly why the American cheese has this plastic quality. Obviously, it's not made from petroleum plastic, but it is highly plasticized in the mechanical sense of the phrase, meaning it can be stretched, folded, rolled into uniform sheets, and melted on the burger without ever splitting. In the UK and France, cheese is deeply tied to the concept of terroir. Terroir, I had to check the pronunciation of that, obviously a French word. The idea that the specific grass, soil, climate, environment the cows or goats are in directly affects the flavor of the milk they produce. European cheeses like Stilton and Roquefort have strict legal protection, specifying exactly how and where they must be made because of the diet and the environment of the cows. By the turn of the 20th century, US dairy went almost completely industrial. Massive, consolidated corporate farms focused on producing millions or billions of gallons of milk that taste exactly the same. So when you feed your cattle uniform diets of grain and silage in an industrial setting, you get completely uniform taste. Therefore, if the milk has a complete uniform flavor, the mass market cheddar or jack will always taste the same. And comment below, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Should all cheeses taste the same, or should we have variety? So when Americans visit Europe, Britain, France, Italy, very big cheese producing nations, they're often shell shocked when they see these big wheels of cheese, not even refrigerated, just on tables, and people cutting out the sections of them. Apparently, in the US, consumer expectation is uniformity and absolute sterility. If a cheese has a strong aroma or a natural fuzzy rind, the average American supermarket shopper would presume it's gone bad. Because the US stores cater to this, everything is completely scrubbed, wax coated, plastic wrapped, and chilled to near freezing, all of which completely shuts down the enzymes that allow cheese to develop its natural flavor. But as I think it was Tyler Rumpel on YouTube said, it's what he grew up with. So he doesn't know any different. To him, cheese is this plastic stuff, and he's happy with that. You know? Can't complain if you don't know any different. So then we come on to butter. Butter. In America, they sell sticks of butter. So you have a packet and there's several sticks of butter inside it, which apparently makes it easy when you're baking. So it's already there. In Britain, we have packs of butter. The average size is 250 grams for a pack. Now we call them packs of butter, and this is likely a mispronunciation of the original word, which was a pat of butter. Milkmaids used to have two paddles, which they would beat the churned milk and get out all the liquid and shape it into a block. So the block of butter was called a pat of butter. It had been patted into shape. And when commercialization started and butter was sold in shops wrapped in this foil, we started calling it a pack of butter. Pat, pack. You can see how it evolved there. However, in restaurants and little cafes, tea shops, when you buy a scone or a tea cake, it will come with what they still call a pat of butter. That's little tiny packets. Now, obviously, back in the day, 250 years ago or so, Americans also had the butter pats because they made the butter the same way we did. Same way pretty much everybody did that. But their mass market factories started producing the butter in sticks. That became popular. It was very easy to follow cooking instructions: 1 stick, half a stick, quarter a stick, etc. So now they just talk about sticks of butter, I'm told. But then the butter itself is somewhat different. In America, butter has to contain 80% butterfat, a good amount. The remaining 20% is mostly water. In Europe and UK, the butterfat has to be 82% at least, normally stretching to 84, 85%. That extra 2 to 4% might not sound like it makes much of a difference, but it means American butter contains more water. And when baking, that extra water evaporates, which makes pie crusts, your pastries, behave differently. It melts much faster, so the biscuits end up flatter on the baking tray. It makes trying to make something like a phyllo pastry near impossible because you get that separation, and it makes buttercream frosting much less stable. Little percentage, big difference. And then there's the hidden flavor difference, which shocks people. This is the sweet cream versus cultured butter. The US style of butter, sweet cream, the vast majority of American butter is made from unfermented, pasteurized, again, cream. It tastes mildly sweet, neutral, flat. UK European style butter is what they call cultured, and it usually goes through a fermentation step. So live bacterial cultures are added to the cream, which causes it to ferment slightly before it is churned. This introduces lactic acid, which gives our butter a distinctly rich, tangy, buttery aroma and a much deeper yellow natural color. Sorry. Now, seems weird to me, but apparently this is dairy eggs. I've known that dairy eggs are connected, and I wasn't sure why. And I asked an AI. It told me it's basically because they're both produced by animals. And the single biggest cultural shock for Americans coming to our supermarkets are the eggs. They don't live in the dairy aisle. They're not refrigerated in Britain. In America, the eggs are kept in the fridges. And American tourists here have commented before that it seems weird that the eggs are not in the fridge, that they're going to go bad. It's quite the contrary, actually. So there's going to be a lot of details here that might seem boring to you. I found them interesting when I was researching this, because I knew the basic facts, but not the whole details. So the basic facts: in America, they wash the eggs, pressure wash them, use chemicals, and they remove the brown coating. Our eggs are brown, generally. That coating, that membrane, protects the eggs from bacteria. So our eggs are protected from the bacteria, and they're in maybe the baking section of the shop. American eggs, because they've had the protection removed, have to be kept in the fridge. That's the major difference. So if you're not interested in more details about that, you can skip to the next chapter. But I think this is really interesting. By law in the United States, commercial eggs must be washed and refrigerated. By law in the United Kingdom, commercial eggs must not be washed and are stored at room temperature. So in my kitchen, my eggs are on the side, on the countertop. Now, this is a battle of food safety philosophies. The big thing was salmonella. This caused massive panics 40 or so years ago. The US focused on treating the salmonella externally. Factories power wash the eggs in hot, soapy water and spray them with disinfectant. But this scrubbing destroys the egg's protective layer, the cuticle, and without that, the eggs have to be stored in fridges because the shell is now porous and bacteria can enter it. The UK tackled the salmonella problem differently through the British Lion Code. Our farmers vaccinate their chickens against salmonella so it doesn't get to the eggs. And we have almost completely eradicated salmonella from the country. Because the inside is clean, the law forbids washing the eggs. Leaving them unwashed keeps the natural cuticle intact, blocking bacteria naturally, allowing them to sit safely on regular room temperature shelves, just like they would with the hen. So in the UK, the National Control Programme for Salmonella mandated strict testing, biosecurity and hygiene tracking for commercial folk. The law does not explicitly say chickens have to be vaccinated, but instead the vaccination requirement comes from the supermarkets themselves. If your chickens are vaccinated, your eggs get what they call the line mark of quality. And the supermarkets insist that they will only sell these types of eggs. Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Morrison, Aldi, Asda, they all refuse to stock eggs that don't have the British Lion mark on them.
Every egg individually marked to show it's a line egg and not washed.
And so if a business wants to stay in business, big business, it's got to follow the demands. Obviously, this doesn't count for your neighbour who has chickens in the yard or that sort of thing. The freehold farmer who sells them on the local market, that's fine. It's not a law that they have to be. But to get the line mark, the chickens have to be vaccinated. And the supermarkets insist on the line mark. See how that works. So why didn't the Americans adopt the vaccination thing? Why this washing the eggs and exposing them to bacteria? Well, they had the option to vaccinate, but it's one of these political things in America. Because in the UK, food safety is largely streamlined. In the US, food safety is notoriously divided between two massive agencies that often step on each other's toes. There's the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, that oversees the actual chickens and the cows and the meat and the facilities. And there's the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and they oversee the eggs once they are laid. So one department looks at the chickens, one department looks at the eggs. Because the FDA doesn't have direct jurisdiction over live farm animals in the same way the USDA does, mandating a live animal medical procedure, vaccination, to solve a food product issue, salmonella, created an absolute nightmare, regulatory red tape. The US egg industry handles hundreds of millions of hens. When mandatory vaccination was proposed, large-scale industrial poultry lobbies fought back. Now, even though vaccine only cost a fraction of a cent per bird, when you're talking about hundreds of millions of birds across thousands of industrial-sized barns, it adds up to millions and millions of dollars. So the industry lobbied the FDA and had them stop that and instead go for the egg washing. The ironic thing is that the US ended up moving towards vaccination anyway. not because of the law, but because of public embarrassment. In 2010, the US suffered one of the largest food safety disasters in its history, a massive salmonella outbreak. And that caused the recall of over 550 million eggs. The backlash from the public was so severe that the industry, the major grocery stores, uh, food outlets like Walmart and McDonald's said, unless the chickens are vaccinated, we're not taking your eggs. Exactly the same as our supermarkets did here. So to sell their eggs commercially to those industries, they need to vaccinate their chickens, which means all that expensive equipment they bought to wash the eggs would go to waste. But no, they're going to wash the eggs as well. Okay, so now we come to our conclusion, what I promised you at the beginning, the fat-free lie. In the 1990s, there was a massive health halo effect, leading consumers to believe that eating fat makes you fat. This was pushed by industry, creating fat-free chips, fat-free milk. That's why semi-skim milk is the most popular milk in the country as opposed to full-fat milk. The reality behind fat actually works in the opposite direction. So let's look at 3 key things which are important why you need fat. First, there is the fat-free sugar trap. Fat gives food texture, mouthfeel, and flavor. When food manufacturers strip fat out of a product, like your biscuits, your yogurts, your crisps, the food tastes bland like cardboard. To fix that, they have to heavily pump the products with sugars, refined starches, and chemical thickeners. Think about that. They pump that fat-free food with sugars and refined starches. Those things cause you to create carbohydrates. That is what becomes fat. Fat doesn't become fat. Those things become fat. So what happens is you end up eating a product that has just as many calories or more than the fat product had, but it triggers massive blood sugar spikes that actually cause your body to store fat. Part 2, fat keeps you full. That's satiated. Dietary fats will cause the release of a hormone that tells your brain, I am full. I don't need to eat anymore. Because, for example, fat-free milk has 0 or as close to 0% fat as possible, your body digests it incredibly quickly. And this leads to a quick spike and drop in blood sugar. The result? Without fat, you don't feel satisfied. You don't feel satiated. So this causes you unconsciously to start reaching for your snacks, your chocolates, your biscuits, your packets of crisps, shortly after you've eaten, which kind of defeats the purpose of that diet. And the third point is the vitamin problem. Nutrients like vitamin A, D, E, K, they are fat-soluble vitamins. That means your body literally needs fat to absorb them. Without dietary fats, you can't absorb those vitamins. When you drink your skimmed milk, you miss out on the natural vehicle your body needs to process those vitamins. In fact, because the vitamins are stripped out with the cream, with the fat, manufacturers have to artificially pump synthetic vitamins back into the product to make it nutritious again. So, fat doesn't make you fat. Sitting in an office chair all day does, but not eating fat. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was interesting for you. Quite a long video. If you have any comments, any thoughts, pop them below. Thank you for joining me, and don't forget to like, subscribe, everything else if you want, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.